stand here today to honor those who have died. We tell those who have gone that we will never forget them or the sacrifices that they have made. This year we remember the 70th anniversary of the end of the Second World War. On May 8th, 1945, the new German government unconditionally surrendered to Allied forces converging all across Europe. The war in Europe had finally come to an end. The Pacific War would rage on until August, when finally the world could try to move on from such a devastating conflict. Nearly 420,000 Americans would be forced to give their lives to win this war. Remembering their actions is not just so that we can stay connected to our past. It is essential to making sure that such a conflict never happens again. This past June, my father and I traveled to Normandy in France, where we witnessed the 70th anniversary of the D-Day landings. On the bluffs above Omaha Beach, where once the German defenders attempted to maintain Hitler's Atlantic Wall, now stand the ruins of those battlements and a solemn American flag. On the field above the beachhead, a monument and an American graveyard look over the beach. At this cemetery above the beach, over 9,300 Americans are buried who lost their lives just in the European campaign. I was overcome with emotion when we visited this graveyard, as I saw the rows of white crosses silently standing on a quiet field. The beach below the cemetery stretched out to the sea, with only the remnants of the German bunkers reminding me I wasn't standing somewhere in Beverly. Omaha Beach itself at low tide stretches nearly 3 football fields from the waterline to the beginning of a massive rolling hill up to the cemetery. For a soldier to get up these bluffs, they would have needed to run across that beach, take shelter in the non-existent landscape, and climb several hundred feet through the rocky wall, all the while taking German machine gun fire. Not an easy task under the best of circumstances. In an early morning, in a storm-filled English Channel, and with the beaches filled with German machine gun fire, I cannot believe anyone made it across that beach alive. I've stood in one of those bunkers that the Germans had fired from, and to think that young men my age would have tried to get past those defenses is mind-boggling. And after this miracle of D-Day, the push across Europe would be filled with American casualties. The hedgerows of France and the rivers of Germany allowed the Nazis an excellent defensive terrain, even as the American air power kept them on this defensive. But their last offensive in the West routed almost every American division in their path and reminded the Western Allies of the blitzkrieg that tore through Europe just a few years before. In what is now called the Battle of the Bulge, American forces were put on the run by a complete surprise attack when the Army Air Corps could not fly due to inclement weather. As the American divisions tried to regroup, the undermanned 101st Airborne Division were sent to try and hold the crucial city of Bastogne against the German onslaught. The paratroopers managed to hold the line, with little or no food, ammunition, or winter clothing. And without the city of Bastogne, the Germans could not resupply their troops or refuel their panzers. Now, although no member of the paratroopers will ever admit to this, they needed rescuing from their situation in the Ardennes. In the Ardennes forest, our own General George Patton from Hamilton, Massachusetts, moved his entire army 90 degrees and marched 24 hours a day to lift the siege of the city. When he arrived, the German attack was doomed, as the attacking divisions were scattered, cut off, and without any air support, as the Allied planes flew again. This was Germany's last offensive in the West, and from the end of this battle, it would be a mere 6 months until victory in Europe. Should the Germans have succeeded in this attack, we certainly would not have seen a victory within 6 months, and the war may not have ended in our favor at all. One member of this famous Third Army of Patton's was Mr. John Benevento. His son, Charlie, my godfather, told me about his father's life and his service to our country. Mr. Benevento's daughter, Mary Ann, and his wife are here today. I needed to know and understand what role he played in this terrible war. See, Mr. Benevento was born in Lynn in 1924 and lived an ordinary American life. In 1943, he joined the Army and was sent to Shelby, Mississippi for training. He was a combat engineer, meaning while the infantry would fight, he would try to rebuild bridges and disable minefields, often with bullets flying by. In 1944, he was sent to Europe, where he joined Patton's Third Army. Now, while building bridges suitable for tanks to drive across and clearing minefields with the Germans shooting at you, and with old blood and guts Patton driving across Europe as fast as his jeep could carry him, Mr. Benevento's time in the Army was one of the most exhausting periods of his life. When the German attack, known as the Battle of the Bulge, began, Mr. Benevento was a part of that army that swung from the eastern flank to lift the siege of Bastogne. Mr. Benevento would see action with 7 different divisions, while the engineers were moved across the line wherever they were needed. They were constantly needed on Patton's drive across southern Germany, and thanked little for their work. This is the type of unit that was ready to do whatever needed to be done, and given very little credit. But his battalion earned 3 stars for their actions in the Ardennes Forest, rescuing the paratroopers, for the Rhineland campaign, and their campaign through Central Europe into Bavaria. Mr. Benevento said that this was the coldest he had ever felt. But he remembered fondly a moment when General Patton inspected a bridge that he had helped construct over the Rhine and urinated into the river. But all of that valor did not prepare him or anyone else for what they would see in Bavaria. On April 14th, 1945, Heinrich Himmler ordered the Germans guarding the Dachau concentration camp to exterminate anyone still alive before evacuating. But as Patton closed in, the Germans had to evacuate early, leaving almost 30,000 Jews to be rescued. Dachau prison was used to hold Jews, gypsies, opponents to the Nazi regime, and held the infamous medical experiments we've read far too much about. The horrors that he saw in that camp is something that you would not wish upon your worst enemy. As an engineer, his job was to use construction equipment to move the bodies into mass graves. He very rarely talked about that experience. Not many from the greatest generation ever do. But many, far too many, were not as lucky as him. They didn't get to come home. Those 9,300 Americans buried atop Omaha Beach are but a fraction of those who have paid the ultimate price for our great nation. It is therefore fitting and proper that we honor those who have died for us. People can be very anti-war, which is fine. Peace is good. But those soldiers who have died for us, that we might sleep safer at night, must be honored. War is a terrible thing. It is my hope that by remembering those sons and daughters who have died in battle, that we will realize the price that must be paid for our safety and freedom. Those who have died on the field of battle for their country are people we need to remember at any cost, lest we forget. We can spend our days focusing on what divides us for the entire year, but not today. Today, we are all Americans, honoring those who have paid the ultimate price for us. So let us not forget to live our lives and make sure that these honored dead have not died in vain. They made the ultimate sacrifice for us. We owe it to them. So thank you for being here, and thank you for remembering.